Welcome to the second episode of the Introduction to R series. Today we're going to learn about verbs. Because you know what makes math more fun? Grammar. In this episode we're going to cover the following. We're going to summon forth some basic standard data sets, and we're going to admire them and how pretty they are. We're going to use basic functions including mean, standard deviation, and histogram in class. We're going to refer to a column of data using the $sign. We're going to make some histograms. We're going to interpret basic error messages, and we are going to defeat that most irritating of error message, the one that doesn't have an error message at all. We're going to identify the blue plus sign of doom. I'm out here in Wenatchee National Forest near Lions Rock. Yes, this place is burnt to a crisp, but that just means there's more sunlight for the flowers. And that just means it's beautiful in its own unique, crispy way. To start out with, we're going to use a data set today about flowers. It's called the Iris data set, and it comes actually pre-installed with R, so it's pretty easy to use, which is why you see a lot of examples on the internet about how to do certain tasks using this data set. To make it visible, you kind of just have to summon it forth from the bowels of R like a daemon. And just like a daemon, you have to give it a name in order to bind it into your environment and to your will. Use the equal sign or the arrow to bind to the daemon. You can summon this little daemon more than once. As long as you give it different names, it will just keep popping up in your environment window. Just make sure that the names are easy to spell. You're not going to forget the capitalization, because the longer the name and the more complicated it is, the more likely you're going to misspell it when you're trying to use it later. And as a heads up, if you capitalize anything or misspell it, R does consider that a new name and a new object. So poop with a capital P is different than poop that is all lowercase. Whatever you've called it, you've got it in your environment now, so let's take a look at it. You can do this just by clicking on the name and it pops up like an Excel spreadsheet. In R, these are referred to as data frames. You can scroll down and filter and do all sorts of stuff in here. None of it is permanent, so it will not change your data. You'll see 5 column names, and if you want to see them faster, you can actually click the little blue arrow next to your data frame in the environment window, and that makes a drop-down menu that shows the column names and the type of data it is. Num for numeric and fac for factorial. In order to view it in the console, you just type the name of your data frame there and you hit enter. Bleh, vomit in the console. Lots of numbers, it's really hard to read. What might be more helpful is to look at just one column of data, so let's take a look at sepal length. To do this requires a little understanding of R grammar. Essentially, we can't just say, look at sepal length. I mean, you can. Go ahead. Type it into the console. See what you get. It does not know where to look. So we have to specify that we want to see a column from a certain data frame. And to do that, you use the $sign. Iris $sign sepal length. That's just the column, but it's still a lot of data. Wouldn't it be nice if we could just look at, say, like an average? Well, you can. You just have to use a verb. See, right now we're just saying, vomit this thing up into the console. But if we want to actually do something with that thing, we have to say what we want to do. Do we want an average, a standard deviation, a plot? For this, we need a function or a method, which is what verbs are called in computer coding. It's essentially the command that you're giving to the computer to tell it to do something. The function we're going to use is the mean function. It has 3 important pieces: the name of the function, mean, the summoning circle of parentheses, and then inside it you're going to place your daemon. Much easier, right? Remember to always include your end parentheses. Summoning circles should be a circle, not a half moon, or you let loose another problem I like to refer to as the blue plus sign of doom. Much like triples, these little babies multiply as long as your circle remains incomplete, because R is waiting for you to finish your sentence. You can kill them by hitting escape or finishing your sentence and typing that end parentheses. This will return you to the blue caret of okayness. It's not as compelling of a name, but it is an accurate description. So if you ever get trapped in R where it appears to be doing nothing, look at your console. You probably have a whole flock of blue plus signs instead of your actual finished code. Okay, so now that we've done a basic function, here are 2 more. I'm going to give you the functions first, and you're going to try to apply them on the sepal length, and then I'm going to show you how they work. Median, standard deviation, and hist. Go ahead and try them on your own first before I show you how to do this. Here's how they work. Just go ahead and put the data frame, $sign, and column you want into the summoning circle and run. That will give you the median, the standard deviation, and the histogram of your data. Now that you've got it up and running, let's go ahead and break them. Let's try running them with just the data frame or with the species column, like this code. Try it yourself and see what sort of error message comes up. It's telling you essentially that this isn't numeric data like it expected and what it wants. For the first one, you've given it an entire data frame and it doesn't know what to do, doesn't know what column to use. For the second, you've given it a list of species, and histograms are the type of graphic that really only work with numbers. But not all functions will give you the same error. Try running these two examples, just the data frame and the species column, but with mean, not with hist. It's a different error message because it's a different function, and for whatever reason, these are not consistent in between the different functions, but they're both saying the same general idea, which is this is not the type of data that I was expecting, and it's not the type of data that I need. Now, there are functions that work with both of these options. Iris and iris $species are both arguments inside the summoning circle. Just because these functions aren't designed for data frames or name data doesn't mean that others aren't. One function that works with all types of data is the class function, because that function is just trying to tell you what type of data you have. Try running these 3 lines of code. See how the function works and it tells you the different types of data that you have? If you run into problems, sometimes the class function can help. It tells you what data you have, and sometimes it's not exactly what you thought you had. All right, one final step before we finish this episode, we're going to simulate another really common error message. I want you to type in the following and see what happens. None of these lines of code work, right? Remember that R does consider spelling and capitalization as being very, very important. So if you spell things wrong, if you call a column that isn't there, those things will not work, and these are the sorts of error messages that you would get. I would say probably 90% of the error messages that I see are the result of misspelling something. All right, so that is it for this episode. If you want to practice a little bit more, try pulling out the different columns from the IRIS dataset and see if you can run them through things like mean and standard deviation and histogram. Otherwise, I will see you in the next episode where we are going to extend our little linguistic metaphor. Instead of saying see Spot run, we're gonna see Spot run super, super fast because there's a Lahar traveling down the hill behind him and he's about to die. Or, some other, I'm sure, equivalently exciting version of that sentence in R. We're going to learn adverbs and adjectives next time. We're going to get fancy.